Today from the global lane, Erdogan takes on his NATO allies. Is he a new Turkish sultan ready to restore the Ottoman Empire? Migrant babies and border battles. Trump backs down. But what are the chances Americans will see immigration reform? The Inspector General's report. What was really going on with the Clinton investigation and the FBI? Locking people up for marijuana possession. Trump suggests he's ready to change federal law. And I'll drive it home on a big ray of light in Hollywood. And it's all right here, right now, from the global lane. Across parts of Europe, Turkey is threatening a coming war between the Cross and Crescent. President Recep Erdogan has threatened NATO ally Denmark over banning Islamic head coverings. Now he's threatening Austria. After that government recently closed several mosques and threw out 60 imams. The Austrians say they're just defending their country against political Islam. Dale Hurd explains it's all part of the Turkish president's Islamic dream to conquer the European continent.
It's being called a fifth column in Europe, a vast network of radical Islamists operating inside Turkish mosques and organizations. And it's under the control of Turkey's ambitious president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Austrian government shut down 7 mosques and expelled 60 imams recently because they were being funded illegally by the Turkish government. And because of this, photos from inside the mosque that surfaced on the internet showing Turkish children being trained to be martyrs. Austria's move against the mosques infuriated Turkey's government, and President Erdogan warned of a coming war between the Cross and the Crescent. The leading expert on Erdogan's network of mosques and Islamic associations in Europe, Turkish journalist Abdullah Bozkurt, calls them Erdogan's fifth column. He spoke to us from Stockholm, Sweden.
What we have been seeing in the last couple of years, an increased activity on the part of the Turkish government to turn the mosques that were financed by the Turkish communities or by the Turkish government, or imams deployed directly from Turkey to serve as sort of political operatives.
Bozkurt says several Islamic and charitable organizations run by the Turkish government are fronts for political activity. This is not Turkey, it's Germany. There are an estimated 5 million Turks in Germany and millions more across Europe. These are Erdogan supporters and Kurds fighting in the streets of Belgium. Bozkurt warns Erdogan's network is a proxy force that can cause social unrest on the streets of Europe and keep Muslims in line.
This is first and foremost a threat to the Muslims actually living in Europe and other countries, because anybody who is not subscribing to this ideology of Erdogan government are deemed as a threat, traitor, not patriotic, and terrorist, or not even Muslim infidels.
Bozkurt calls Erdogan's fifth column a strong card he can play if he needs to strike back at Europe.
Dale joins us from the CBN newsroom with more. So Dale, is Erdogan just making threats for domestic consumption, playing to his political base, or is this guy really serious?
I think all three. He is somewhat limited as to what he can do in Europe. He can't break the law or he gets ejected, as we saw in Austria. He wants a ready pool of protesters if he doesn't feel like the Europeans are treating him well, or if Islam is being disrespected. Perhaps more importantly, he wants to control not only Turks, but I'm learning Muslims in Europe. That this is reaching out beyond the Turkish community to all Muslims in Europe. He wants to make sure that they're on his side, they're supporting him and his views.
So he really sees himself as the defender of Islam in Europe. This latest threat, this war of words over actions in Austria, the Turks have a long history, as you know, of conflict with the people there. There were 2 sieges in Vienna, the first nearly 500 years ago. It seems Erdogan is really opening some old wounds here, Dale. Why?
Well, the whole Ottoman shtick, plays well in Turkey. There's been a resurgence in Ottoman-style patriotism and religious fundamentalism. I think they overall view Europe as a pushover, as passive. I think what happened in Austria was a big shock. I think it took them by surprise. I don't think they were expecting that.
Germany has the largest Turkish population of any country outside of Turkey. Maybe, as you said, as many as 5 million Turks live there. So how concerned are the German people about Erdogan?
Honestly, I don't think concerned enough. I think Germany especially is still trying to think happy thoughts about Turkey. The Turks in Germany are an important part of their economy, and they're used to having the Turks there. So, I don't think they get it. I think Europe is going to start to get it because I think this is going to get worse and worse.
Well, as you know, Turkey is still holding American pastor Andrew Brunson in prison on false charges of espionage against the government. I know the U.S. Senate has tied the sale of about 100 U.S. F-35 fighter jets to Turkey to Brunson's release. So what are the chances he'll be home soon?
I don't have any inside intel on his situation, but Turkey arrested over 70,000 people after the coup. A number of lawyers, journalists, professionals are in jail. Jail is the weapon they're using now. I think the U.S. is going to have to hurt Turkey really hard, harder than this aircraft sale, I think, but also give Erdogan some way to save face. I think those two things will be the key to getting the pastor home.
Okay, Dale Hurd, CBN News senior international correspondent. Thanks so much for your excellent reporting and analysis.
Thank you, Gary.
Both the former and current directors of the FBI came under fire recently during congressional testimony on Capitol Hill. Hearings were held to discuss the Department of Justice Inspector General's report on the FBI's Hillary Clinton email investigation. IG Michael Horowitz found bias at the FBI against Donald Trump, but no evidence the bias had an impact on the Clinton investigation. So what's the truth about all this? What's likely to happen next? How might the IG report and another one coming out in a few months affect the special counsel's Russia collusion investigation? Well, joining us is Sam Nunberg. He's a former Trump campaign aide and political consultant. Sam, what were your thoughts about that IG report? I know many conservatives were disappointed. It seemed it revealed a lot to those who actually read it.
Well, first of all, I think everybody has to understand that IG himself, Horowitz, is not doing anything incorrect when he says, I didn't find any political bias. The reason is the limitation on what he can find. He would literally need these FBI agents to tell him that the entire investigation, the procedures that they took, were all done because of their bias and their support for Hillary Clinton. In other words, he cannot build a circumstantial case. When we look at these texts that were sent, when they look into the fact that the FBI had two witnesses who have to corroborate each other's testimony sitting in the same room, I can tell you that's not the condition and the treatment that I got from Mueller's grand jury, from Mueller's special counsel. I did not get that treatment, nor do any of us. They're just trying to catch us, each of us, in the very least, process perjury traps on Mueller's vendetta against the president. With that said, the irony is that Peter Strzok, who was one of the most senior people. Now, remember, Peter Strzok, when I just say he's one of the most senior people, there's an email where James Comey emails his number two the statement he's preparing to give on the Clinton investigation. And the two people on that email chain that McCabe sends it to are Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who Peter Strzok was having an extramarital affair with. She was cheating on her husband with him. And you have many other instances where when you look at this and you look at the fact that they were conducting this investigation at the same time, and this is critical, at the same time that they were launching a Russian counter-investigation, which Barack Obama certainly knew about. I don't want to hear from anyone he didn't. It strains credulity to believe that they would not have advised the President of the United States they were doing something that sensitive.
Well, some of those texts between the two of them say that the president wants to know everything?
They certainly did. And, we haven't received answers from that. And here's another critical point, which Horowitz conveniently leaves out. And I only assume it's under the orders of Rod Rosenstein, who's an absolute disgrace, who, along with Jeff Sessions, are two of the most dishonorable attorney generals and deputy attorney generals I've ever seen. They leave out Horowitz that there is somebody else, another FBI lawyer, who conducted himself with these political bias, these texts, texts saying that people like you and me who voted for Trump are morons, whatever else it said.
Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, accused James Comey, the former FBI director, of harming her chances to become president by announcing that he was reopening her investigation just days before that 2016 presidential election. Now, your thoughts on that?
Well, Gary, this is the irony of ironies. In the report, in IG Horowitz, Inspector General Horowitz's report, Horowitz has a major problem with Peter Strzok taking his time on the Anthony Weiner computer, which contained Uma Abedin's classified emails. Now, remember, that computer was being used by Anthony Weiner to proposition minors. And Strzok, it wasn't a high priority to him. And Strzok, I believe, may have even said that he was too ingrained, or his attention or was too directed towards the Russian counterintelligence investigation against the Trump campaign. The irony is that because Strzok did not do anything about that computer, which the FBI had as early as September, or could have had, and I believe that local New York FBI field officials and the NYPD forced Strzok, McCabe, Comey, and Strzok's girlfriend, Lisa Page, to take action. And the irony is that it did affect the election.
Yeah, well, they sat on that for about a month. That came out in the IG's testimony before Congress. I think Senator Ted Cruz was asking him about that, and it was obvious they sat on it for a month before they actually made the decision to release the information.
And Gary, if it was up to them, if it was up to Comey, they would not have done anything, and they would not have informed the public. The only reason I believe, and it's insinuated in this report, I don't know, I don't have any personal or firsthand knowledge of this, Gary. I got to be careful, because then Mueller will call me back in to the grand jury and try to get me in a perjury trap. But I believe that they received, the DC, the James Comeys, they received a lot of pressure from American heroes who are these unnamed and New York FBI agents and the NYPD.
Despite all the negative media that this president is getting, he seems to be growing in approval and popularity. So how is all this affecting him personally and his presidency?
Well, thank God it isn't, because he's a very strong man and he's adapted. I always thought that the president was going to not realize that, look, the political gravity will never apply to Donald Trump. It just won't. But presidential gravity and the institutions were initially going to apply. And I always thought it was going to be difficult for him to go from the 26th floor of Trump Tower and not realize he's just, frankly, not the boss. And he's got to operate differently in some ways. So,
well, it seems like he is acting a little more presidential these days. I think the whole North Korea thing in Singapore helped that.
100%. He's hit his stride. And ultimately, this midterm is a referendum on Donald Trump. If the Republicans do not keep the House, and if the Democrats even have a one-seat majority and Nancy Pelosi is Speaker, in January 2019, I will tell you that Jerry Nadler, Adam Schiff, and Pelosi will impeach this president. They will keep this process going on. They will try to affect his reelection. Once again, if the Republicans do not keep the Senate, your audience has to understand that the president may very well, get another Supreme Court justice vacancy. And I guarantee you that if it's a Democrat Senate, they will not push anybody through to this president. So it's very important. This is ultimately Donald Trump's first reelection. And it's important for all of us, once again, to rise up and have a historic win for him, because this president is bringing peace from North Korea. He is securing our border. And most importantly, American optimism, people happy with the direction of the country, and our economic prosperity has never been higher after the malaise from Obama. And I think that that's why, whether we like him personally, whether we like everything he does, and I'm sure we all don't, we all have our problems, we have to work just as hard as we did in 2016 in that election for him, that midterm. And even despite the Republicans themselves in Congress, we're doing this for Donald Trump, and I hope we all go out and vote.
Okay, Sam Nunberg, I think it's going to be a long, hot summer, maybe even a hotter fall as we prepare for the midterm election coming up in about 5 months. So I know you'll stay on top of it, and we appreciate you. We'll be back with you again. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I think everything will work out, but we'll see.
After hysteria overtook Washington and much of America, President Trump signed an executive order ending his policy of separating illegal immigrant children from their parents.
We're going to have a lot of happy people. This has been going on for 60 years. 60 years, nobody's taken care of it. Nobody's had the political courage to take care of it.
Joining us with more on the president's decision and to talk about immigration reform in America is Maria Espinosa. She's president of the Remembrance Project. Maria, what do you think of the president's executive action?
I think it shows that President Trump has compassion for everyone, and he is legislating for the betterment of America, but also he listens, and he's a caring person, and which makes him a great leader. He is still very strong, however, on the fact that he wants his border security, a border wall, and that he will place the safety of all Americans first.
Maria, in all this emotional debate about 2,000 children being removed from their parents, and I know that's only about 10% of the total children, because most of them are unaccompanied minors that are being held in detention facilities. But what was the truth about all this? There were allegations that they were being placed in Nazi-like concentration camps and cages. How is this any different than how they were treated maybe 5 years ago?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to think about America's children. And, our legislators right now on all levels of government are not enforcing existing laws in order to keep our children in our communities safe. But back to these, what the fake news has talked about, these concentration camps, which is absolutely the opposite. They have 3 well-balanced meals a day. They're an air conditioning facility. They have a foosball table, a pool table, a basketball table. They watch movies. They have television. This is not what the fake news wants people to believe, and they don't want the truth out there because, of course, they probably are treated better in our country than back at home.
But still, we saw these images of crying children being removed from their parents. And, I was surprised because one of them I saw, I think it was in an ABC story, had a graphic of a child going, "Daddy, Daddy." And it's like, if that was a child from Central America, wouldn't they be saying, "Papi, Papi"? Where did they learn English?
Good point. You're absolutely right. And it also shows that, the left media, fake news is not above being a bit untruthful, Gary. So I think that all of this process and what President Trump is doing, placing America first, is exposing how far the left will go to push their liberal agenda.
Well, what is that agenda? What is that agenda, Maria? What's the goal?
The goal, the ultimate goal, Gary, is to take down our country, to ruin America, to overflood America with other countries' undesirables, which there are countries, as we can see now, that they are being pushed out by their own government intentionally. Remember, Mexico put out that publishing in the 90s telling their nationals where to go, what to do, how to get here to the United States, and what to do when they arrived and what to say. And we've known that for some time now. But again, the left media does not publish that and tell the truth about it. And, the Democrats want that new voter bloc. And the Republicans here, they continue to take money from the open borders lobbyists. And, in our opinion, that is blood money that they are taking to fill their reelection campaign coffers, Gary, while our children are filling America's coffins. This has to stop. And first and foremost, American politicians have to take care of Americans and our families.
And it doesn't seem like we're going to have real reform here before the midterm election. legislation is not expected to be approved in Congress. So what do you think of that?
Gary, we have existing laws, immigration laws and laws here, ways and processes that people can come to our country. So I'm fine with that. I actually would rather just step away from Washington, D.C. and go home and make sure that laws in their areas are being enforced in order to have a safer country and really, really give back America, back to the American people where it belongs, and stop legislating for the betterment of non-citizens.
Okay, Maria Espinosa, the Remembrance Project. Stay in touch with us. Thanks for joining us, Maria. While the immigration debate rages on, there's some news about marijuana legalization efforts in America. While 9 U.S. states allow personal use, President Trump is now signaling that he may favor ending the federal ban on marijuana. And here to set us straight is Kevin Ring. He's president of FAM, Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Kevin, why should President Trump and Congress lift the federal ban on marijuana?
Well, I think it's a couple issues. One, they're listening to the will of the people. We've had a number of states who have moved in that direction. And two, I think it's a matter of federal resources. At a time where we expect our FBI and federal law enforcement to track al-Qaeda and protect our border and do all these other serious things, the idea that we need to use federal resources, expensive prison space, prosecutors, courts, to enforce marijuana laws is a misuse of priorities. There's higher demands on those resources.
And we know that many American prisons are really at the max right now. So how many Americans are in prison right now on marijuana charges, and what impact has that had on their families and lives? What's your main concern?
Well, there's tens of thousands of prisoners who are in prison for marijuana. There are people in our federal prison who are still serving life sentences because of marijuana charges. That wouldn't happen today, but it has happened in the past, and they're still serving. They're going to die in prison because of that. And it's just a complete waste. It's not good for families. It's not to say that these people shouldn't have been held accountable for their crimes and their mistakes. They should be. But the punishments are so disproportionate to their crimes that, it not only hurts their families, separates them, divides them, makes it harder on the children, but by wasting resources in this way, we have fewer resources to go after people who really are a threat to communities and neighborhoods. And so it's just a perversion of resources. And so I think the president's doing the right thing. I think that, if we care about families, we want to hold people accountable, but we don't want to tear families apart for decades for offenses that could be treated either through drug treatment or through other sanctions.
Sure. If you're sitting in jail or in prison for a few joints or something, you're not earning money to support your family. You probably lose your job. I guess possession of small amounts of marijuana is considered a misdemeanor, no big deal, or is it? Is it a big deal?
No, it is. But I mean, this is the problem we get into with all drug offenses, frankly, which is we try to make a distinction between, a small-time user and then somebody who's a dealer or a trafficker, and we have in mind, El Chapo. The problem is a lot of people sell drugs in order to afford their own addiction. And so it's not, the line between user and dealer is not so clear. And so the same is true of marijuana. If we think it's okay for people to use it in small amounts, in ways that aren't dangerous, then the idea that we're going to lock everybody up who actually sells marijuana doesn't make a lot of sense. And so it's really time to rethink this policy. And yet, at the federal level, we still have marijuana ranked as high as the most dangerous drugs.
That's hard to believe, isn't it? That it's still ranked as a very dangerous drug.
Yes.
Now, I know some medical and health professionals are citing reports that show marijuana harms physical and mental health. Is that a good reason to maintain the ban? How concerned are you about that?
Well, it's actually a good point. I think it's worth saying that just because something shouldn't be federally prohibited doesn't mean it's great for you. And I mean, look, cigarette smoking is at an all-time low, and teen smoking is at an all-time low. Those are both good things, but we didn't throw people in jail as a result of smoking. We just used public education and, sort of cultural change to make that happen. You don't see it in movies. We don't glorify smoking in the same way that you might have seen James Dean or others do it. So I think there's things that as culture can do to dissuade certain behavior. We don't have to put people in cages for decades. And so I think that you don't have to believe that marijuana is this cure-all that some of its proponents say to think we don't have to ban it and incarcerate people who use it. So I do think, like, I'm a father, I have children in high school, I don't want them smoking marijuana every day. But that's something different than saying I want the FBI enforcing this.
Okay, so what do you think, Kevin, will happen here? Is the country going to pot, or are we going to become a nation of potheads? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think it's like everything. I think you get a new freedom and people may abuse it. And so you'll see in Colorado and Washington State, you'll hear complaints about people using it to excess. But again, I think the smoking analogy is apt. We didn't need a federal law against it to discourage its use. There's things you can do through regulation and tax that can make sure that we don't overuse something. And so we might be a little indulgent right now in the states that are trying it out, but it's also a pretty responsible way to do it in a federalist system, which is some states legalizing going forward, and we're learning things from their experiment. So I think we're really doing this in a really considered and deliberate way.
Okay, another matter that is states' rights versus federal government, I guess. Kevin Ring, president of Families Against Mandatory Minimums, FAM. Thanks for setting us straight today.
Thanks for having me.
Jurassic World is expected to be this summer's biggest blockbuster movie, and the star of the film is actor Chris Pratt.
More dinosaurs than ever before, more dinosaurs than you've ever seen in a Jurassic Park movie. Blue's still my favorite. Blue's always going to be my favorite.
At a time when more and more Hollywood actors and actresses are spewing political hatred, isn't it refreshing to see and hear a celebrity talking positive and shining light? You may have missed it, so here it is. Pratt recently won the MTV Generation Award and accolades from Christians around the world for sharing 9 rules with the award ceremony and TV audience. He said each person has a soul. He urged us to be careful with it. He proceeded through each point on his list.
Number 8, learn to pray. It's easy and it's so good for your soul. And finally, number 9, nobody is perfect. People are going to tell you you're perfect just the way you are. You're not. You are imperfect. You always will be. But there is a powerful force that designed you that way. And if you're willing to accept that, you will have grace. And grace is a gift. And like the freedom that we enjoy in this country, that grace was paid for with somebody else's blood. Do not forget it. Don't take it for granted. God bless you. Please get home safely.
So this message to Hollywood and to all of us. If you disagree with the president's policies or anyone's opinions, how about sharing yours with respect and showing a little more love? Chris Pratt is an example of how that works. And if you feel you must speak out, speak against policies. Don't spew hatred towards individuals and personalities. And then offer solutions. The world is listening, and your reputation, your character, and integrity are at stake. So let's keep it civil. America sure could use a little more civility these days, don't you think? Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.